I was finalizing the 3D rendering for our engagement party, mapping out every detail of the space I'd designed myself. My fiancée Chloe walked in her face, glowing from her phone screen. She didn't even look at my work. She said, "I think we should open our relationship, but only on my side." I didn't get angry. I didn't argue. I just stayed silent for a long 3 seconds. I looked right at her and I said, "Okay." She smiled, thinking it was weakness. She didn't know it was a declaration of war. "My name is Ethan. I'm 32 years old and I'm a designer. But I don't just design on paper, I'm a builder. My value is in turning raw wood and cold metal into spaces with a soul. I believe in things that are tangible, things that are durable, things that take time and meticulous effort to create. And for the last 3 years, that's how I built my relationship with Chloe. Chloe, she's 29. She lives in a different world. She's a social media queen. Her life is measured in likes in the perfect angle of a photo and the value of the brands she tags. She doesn't build, she performs. I spent 6 months turning our loft apartment into a home. I built the dining table where we ate our meals with my own hands. I designed the bookshelf where she displayed her expensive decorative objects. I paid for 70% of our engagement party deposit with the bonus from a huge project. A project that had me working 80-hour weeks. I did all of it, not for show, but because I truly believed in the future we were building together. But the cracks were already there. They were in the little comments that seemed harmless at the time. She'd be scrolling through her phone. She'd say, "Look at this, Ethan. My friend's husband just took her to Bali. It must be so inspiring." Or she'd watch me sanding down a piece of reclaimed oak and she'd say, "Your work is admirable, really. But isn't it a little dusty?" She started talking about feeling like she was missing out on experiences. She followed influencers who had nomadic lifestyles, who promoted modern relationships. She called it research. I was naive enough to believe her. The biggest red flag came last month. I'd booked a table at a restaurant, a place with a 3-month waiting list, to celebrate the anniversary of our engagement. In the middle of dinner, she spent 20 minutes on a live stream. She was talking to her followers about how important it is to maintain the romance while I sat across from her in silence, watching my food get cold. She was performing our love instead of actually living it, and I ignored it. I told myself it was her job, a part of who she was. But I understand now. I was never her partner. I was just part of her personal brand, a good-looking, reliable prop for the backdrop of her perfect online life. The next morning, while Chloe was humming in the bathroom getting ready for a creative energy day, I was at the dining table. I built systematically dismantling our future. The movements were precise, efficient, with no wasted emotion. At 7:05 a.m., I made the first call. Liam, my best friend, he's a contract lawyer. I said, "Liam, I need you to review all my business and personal assets. Everything. I need a legal firewall effective immediately." At 7:15, I was online searching for the city's most reputable private investigator. I skipped the cheap options. I chose a firm run by ex-cops, professional, expensive. At 7:30, I made the second call. A man named Robert answered, his voice calm and firm. I laid it out. "My fiancée is Chloe. I need you to follow her. I need data, not speculation. Photos, locations, time subjects, everything." To pay Robert's retainer, I did something I felt was poetic justice. I logged into our joint bank account, the one we called the Wedding and Engagement Fund, and transferred a large sum. Chloe called it self-discovery. Discovery costs money. And since this was a critical part of our future, I decided it was only fair that our joint fund would finance the research. It wasn't theft, it was a reallocation of assets. Robert's reports were delivered daily like clockwork. Report day 1 subject met a man named Trevor at the Oak Room. They left at 10:30 p.m. in his BMW. Report day 3 subject checked into the Marlowe Boutique Hotel. Trevor arrived 15 minutes later. They left together the next morning. Attached were clear photos of them kissing at the valet stand. Report day 5 subject was shopping with Trevor. The purchase, a luxury handbag, was made with my supplementary credit card. But the final crushing detail wasn't a photo, it was an audio file Robert captured from a nearby table at the restaurant. It was Chloe's voice, bright and proud. She was saying, "Ethan, oh, he's amazing." So, understanding. He's totally supportive of me having inspiring friends. She wasn't just betraying me, she was making me the punchline to her joke. She was turning me into the fool who was paying for the rope she was using to hang him. While I was quietly collecting the truth, Chloe was living in a completely different reality. She grew radiant, glowing, with a brazen confidence. Her yoga nights and creative meetups became more and more frequent. She'd come home late, smelling of a strange perfume, telling me vague stories about the interesting people she was meeting. A subtle contempt began to creep into the way she spoke to me. One evening, I was sketching out a design for a client. She looked over my shoulder. She said, "What you do is so lovely, Ethan. So, hands-on. But don't you ever want to do something bigger? Something with real impact?" She'd just come back from a networking event, which I knew from Robert's report was a cocktail hour with Trevor. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. My dusty, tangible work versus the glamorous world of impact her lover supposedly lived in. So I decided to push her confidence to its absolute peak. I said, "You're right." I looked up from my sketchbook. "Maybe I've been thinking too small. You should keep meeting with those people. Maybe they'll inspire us both." Then I did something more. I transferred more money to her supplementary card. I said, "Go buy yourself something beautiful for your next event. You deserve it." She was ecstatic. She thought she had me completely under her control. She didn't realize the leash she was holding wasn't for me, it was a noose she was tying for herself. Every night after she fell asleep, I'd sit in front of my computer. I wasn't working. I was meticulously arranging each photo, each video clip, each credit card statement into a presentation. I chose the font carefully. I aligned the margins perfectly. I gave the file a cold corporate name, Project Chloe's Self-Discovery Q1 Report. This wasn't an act of jealousy. It was the work of an architect designing the blueprints for a perfect demolition. The engagement party was held at a modern art gallery, a space I had personally designed for a client a year ago, minimalist with high ceilings and stark white walls. The perfect canvas, 100 guests, a curated list of our most important people, her family, her influencer friends, my business partners. The air smelled of expensive flowers and champagne. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. Everything was perfect. Chloe was the center of it all, a star in her own orbit, dressed in a white gown that cost more than my first car. She glided through the room, phone in hand, live streaming her most magical night. Her father finished his speech, a rambling toast about his perfect daughter finding her perfect match. Everyone clapped. Then it was my turn. I walked up to the small stage. I didn't feel nervous. My heart wasn't racing. It was beating with a slow, cold rhythm. I looked down at Chloe. She was looking up at me, her eyes shining with adoration, completely oblivious. She still thought my silence was acceptance. She was wrong. It wasn't acceptance, it was strategy. We are taught that strength is about confrontation, about winning the argument. But there is a greater power, the power of choosing not to play. The quiet exit isn't the act of a loser, it's the strategy of a man who has realized the game is no longer worth his energy. By refusing to engage in her drama, I had taken away her greatest weapon, the argument she craved, and I had focused all my energy on my next move. It is the great paradox in some wars, the only way to win is to refuse to fight. You just calmly walk away from the board, taking your king, your self-respect with you, and leave your opponent alone with the empty game they created. Thank you all for coming. I began my voice warm, sincere. Chloe and I have built so much together, and recently she has started a very important personal journey. She calls it self-discovery, and as her partner, I want to support that. In fact, I want to share her incredible discoveries with all of you, the people we love most. I gave a small nod to the technician in the back. The large projector screen behind me, which had been cycling through a romantic slideshow of our photos, went black. A 2-second pause, a dramatic pause. The room held its breath. Then the screen flickered to life. The first slide appeared, simple black text on a white background. It read, Project Chloe's Self-Discovery. A few people chuckled, thinking it was a joke. Chloe's smile faltered. The next slide was a screenshot of her text message. I think we should open our relationship, but only on my side. The chuckles died. A confused murmur rippled through the room. The next slide was a photograph. Chloe and Trevor holding hands as they walked out of the oak room. The date and time were stamped at the bottom. I heard a glass shatter somewhere in the room. The next slide was a short video clip. No audio, just Chloe and Trevor in the parking garage of the Marlowe Hotel kissing. His hands were on her waist, hers were around his neck. It was passionate, it was undeniable. I glanced at Chloe's parents. Her mother, Sharon, had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Her father was staring at the screen, his face turning a dark shade of red. The next slide was a split screen. On the left, a photo of the luxury handbag Trevor had bought her. On the right, a screenshot of my credit card statement with the charge from that exact store circled in red. Chloe was no longer looking at the screen. She was staring at me, her face, a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The color had drained from her cheeks. Her perfect smile was gone, replaced by a gaping mouth. I brought the presentation to a close with the final slide. A high-resolution photo taken from across the street looking into the window of their hotel room. The image was tastefully blurred, but the identities were clear. As you can see, I said into the microphone, my voice still perfectly calm. Her journey has been a tremendous success. Therefore, I am officially announcing that Project Marriage is hereby concluded, so she can fully commit to her other project. Congratulations, Chloe. This engagement party is now your farewell party. I placed the microphone back on its stand, turned, and walked off the stage. I didn't stay to watch the chaos. Liam was waiting for me at the service exit, just as we'd planned. He put a hand on my shoulder. We walked out into the cool night air, leaving the sound of shouting and shattering glass behind us. We didn't say a word on the drive. We didn't have to. The performance was over. The stories of what happened next came to me in fragments over the following days. The engagement party had descended into a bitter family feud right there in the gallery. Chloe's father, a man who had built his reputation on the image of a perfect family, had confronted her in front of everyone. I was told he didn't yell. He just looked at her with utter disappointment and said, "You have shamed this entire family?" The karma, as they say, was swift and merciless. Every consequence was a direct result of the world she had built for herself. First, Trevor. He sent her a single text message that night. "Do not contact me again." Then he blocked her number, her social media, her entire existence. He wasn't a partner in her new life. He was an accessory to her old one. The moment that accessory became a liability, it was discarded. Then her family. Her parents, mortified beyond words, canceled all the wedding arrangements the very next morning. They lost every deposit. The dream wedding she had meticulously planned on Pinterest boards was wiped off the map in a series of phone calls. The relationship, once built on pride, was now a ruin of disappointment. But the real earthquake happened in the world she valued most, her online kingdom. A few guests at the party had filmed my presentation. The videos were blurry, the audio was muffled, but the message was clear. The story of the influencer exposed at her own engagement party spread like a wildfire through group chats and forums. Her brand was built on a curated version of authenticity. My presentation proved that her entire life was a lie. The brands noticed. The organic skincare company that paid her $5,000 a post sent an email terminating her contract, invoking their morals clause. The fast fashion labels she represented quietly removed her from their list of ambassadors. The lifestyle app that featured her in their modern relationships section pulled her content and issued a public statement about valuing transparency. She hadn't just lost a few deals, she had lost her currency. Her credibility was gone. Chloe's downfall wasn't just confined to that art gallery. It went viral in the most powerful courtroom of the 21st century. This is the very nature of the modern court of screens. The 100 guests in that room might have been swayed by personal relationships, by social pressure, but the thousands of strangers who saw the clips online, they were an impartial jury. They only cared about the evidence. And my presentation, with its undeniable proof, was Exhibit A. This story proves a vital truth about our time. Power no longer just belongs to those with money or titles. It also belongs to whoever holds the digital proof. In a world where anything can be recorded, your actions are your final legacy, and anyone with a smartphone can become the judge. 2 months passed. And in those 2 months, our worlds, which had once been so tightly intertwined, split into 2 entirely different universes. Chloe's universe shrank. After the online backlash became too much, she deleted her Instagram account. Her entire curated world, her thousands of followers, her brand identity vanished with a single click. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she moved back into her childhood bedroom at her parents' house. The stage was gone, the audience was gone. There were no more PR packages arriving at the door, no more invitations to exclusive events, no more flattering lights to hide behind. There was only the heavy judgmental silence of her parents at the dinner table and the four walls of a room that held memories of a person she no longer was. She tried to reach out once, an email, a single paragraph filled with a weak apology and a vague suggestion that we could work through this together. I replied with the contact information for a highly recommended therapist. I wrote, "Start by working on yourself." I never heard from her again. My universe, on the other hand, expanded. I found my peace again in the place it had always been waiting for me, my workshop. I found solace in the smell of sawdust and varnish in the honest work of my hands. The noise of the world outside faded away, replaced by the satisfying hum of a table saw and the gentle scrape of a hand plane on wood. My business didn't just survive, it thrived. The story of what happened at the engagement party, against all logic, had become the best marketing I never asked for. It circulated not as gossip, but as a legend. I wasn't seen as a vengeful ex. I was seen as a man of principle. A man who built things to last and who wasn't afraid to tear down something built on a rotten foundation. The calls started coming in. Clients who wanted more than just a nice piece of furniture, they wanted something made with integrity. Last week, a man walked into my workshop unannounced. He was older, dressed in a simple but expensive suit. I recognized him instantly. He was the CEO of one of the city's biggest tech firms. He looked around the workshop at the tools hanging neatly on the walls, at the half-finished projects. He ran a hand over a solid oak table I was building. He said, "I heard about you." He finally looked at me and extended his hand. Not from the gossip sites. From a friend of mine who was at that party. He told me you were the calmest man in the middle of a hurricane. He said you presented the truth like you were presenting a blueprint. No anger, just facts. I shook his hand. He continued, "I'm building a new headquarters. I need someone who builds things honestly, methodically, especially when faced with chaos. I hear you're that kind of man." That afternoon, I signed a contract to design and furnish his entire executive floor. The value of that single contract was almost exactly what I had lost on the deposits for the engagement party and the wedding. Sometimes justice isn't just blind. It has a wickedly ironic sense of humor. This afternoon, I was cleaning the workshop. In a corner, under a thin layer of sawdust, was a set of walnut candle holders I'd carved. They were meant for our wedding table. My first impulse was to throw them into the furnace, but I didn't. I cleaned them, polished the wood until the grain shone, and placed them on my own workbench. They are no longer a symbol of a lost future. Now they're a reminder of the value of creation, of honest work, the things that no one can ever take away from me. This was never a story about revenge. Revenge is for people who still care enough to hate. This was a story about boundaries, about realizing the home you build must have a foundation of respect. And if it doesn't, you have to be the one to tear it down before it collapses on top of you. A lot of people have told me that I won. But sometimes I wonder, what if my business hadn't succeeded after this? What if I had struggled financially? Would my decision still have been the right one? The answer is absolutely yes. We are often ruled by outcome bias, judging a decision based on its results. But the real value of what I did wasn't in landing a big contract. It was in the moment I chose my self-respect over a toxic tolerance. The success of walking away is not measured by a bank account, but by the peace you reclaim for your own soul. The business success was just a nice bonus. The victory of character happened the moment I walked off that stage. I'm not going back to Chloe. I'm not forgiving her. I am simply continuing to build. Only this time, I'm building for myself.